So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with House of Dragon. So let's start the series. As usual, the morning in Konoha started with the sun shining, the birds singing, life going on as usual, and other trash. However, we are only interested in one blonde who is well known to many people in the village. His name is Uzumaki Naruto, and he is 25 years old, but he only looks 20. He is well built, with broad shoulders, muscular arms, and 6 hard cubes on his stomach that you can even rub cheese on. Because of his natural beauty and athletic physique, Naruto is in high demand among women, but he is known in the village, and beyond, not for his romantic exploits, but also for saving the world twice, and before that he accomplished many other things. Now our blonde was sleeping on his bed and snoring peacefully, considering that for the last half a year he did nothing but track down some organization that itself got entangled in its own device in an attempt to create a network that would be impossible to track down, which led to the fact that the idiots themselves got entangled in their so-called web. Naruto had spent countless hours and clones to figure out the whole mess that this organization was, and for this I had to rummage through documents, interrogate people, search various places, find traces, connect the dots, storm some dubious complexes. So during this time, Uzumaki got pretty tired and began to look like an angry demon. Fortunately, the blonde did not kill anyone, so his victims escaped with only a few broken limbs, although this cannot be said about Sakura, who always turned off the instinct of self-preservation when it came to Naruto, so Haruno, as if not noticing the nasty nature of her son Yondaime, decided to hit him for not saying hello to her, so that in the next second she would be smashed into the Hokage mountain. Student Sanina then survived thanks only to the timely help from Tsunade. This case should have been a good lesson for the pink-haired Kunoichi, but fortunately, Tsunade refrained from filing charges against Naruto because she knew how difficult it would be for Naruto to finish this task, given the numerous letters of complaint he had sent her over the months. To be honest, Sakura learned a valuable lesson from this, as she repeatedly disabled patients due to her aggression, which the hospital management was not happy about. After accepting the blonde's report and the information needed for additional research, Hashirama's granddaughter granted the hero of the 4th Shinobi World War an indefinite leave of absence to allow him to come to his senses. Uzumaki slept a lot the following day, and his face was still irritated when he woke up. Nevertheless, Naruto overcame his desire to sleep and down to the first floor, where his kitchen was. Although the furniture and other things were very expensive and of great quality, they were insignificant in comparison to what Uzumaki accomplished for the entire globe. Naruto's 2-story home was constructed by the elderly man Tazuna himself. Naruto let out a big yawn and switched on his favorite coffee maker, which the daimyo of the Land of Spring personally gave him, along with an endless supply of coffee beans. And guess what? Naruto enjoyed the coffee since it gave him energy to do paperwork, and he detested bureaucracy. Coffee therefore considerably aided him with his paperwork, and his spiritual state was severely ruined by the 6 months he spent away from her on this miserable job. Ah, there's nothing better than fresh coffee in the morning, except for ramen, of course, he said, inhaling the aroma of the beverage. He took a sip from his favorite cup, which was handmade and engraved with the clan's symbol. Hinata herself gave the cup to him as a personal gift, and Kushina's son opened his eyes and exhaled blissfully. He asked. Naruto looked around and saw that although he was no longer in his kitchen, a kitchen existed. It was not even his home. The blonde found himself in an abandoned location with hardly clean air, destruction, and an unnatural fog. He could verify that the fog wasn't natural even without switching to the sage mode, and the emotions were more than sufficient. As he scented the dark beverage, the final Uzumaki muttered, it looks like I added something wrong to my coffee," taking another sip and shaking his head. "No, the taste is the most common, so it's hardly hallucinations, and I'm not sure about genjutsu," he said. Kurama said, "This is not a genjutsu, we were moved somewhere, and very carefully and quickly that we did not even notice, not overly thrilled that they were embarking on yet another trip." Ha! What does moved mean? That's what it means, idiot. It's unlikely that we are now in Konoha, or within the reach of the Fire Nation. The fox growled. I even doubt that we are in the elemental nations, even nature here feels different. You're right, we're way too far away, nodded at Naruto's remarks and entered sage mode. The very nature here is polluted beyond recognition, something terrible must have happened. For a moment I almost lost concentration on natural energy. Something is clearly wrong with this place. The strongest of the 9 Bijus concurred, saying, "We'd better leave before you run into something." His orange shorts and white t-shirt were quickly replaced by black pants and a red shirt, over which an orange wool jacket was thrown, and black sandals appeared on his feet. Naruto chose to disregard his friend's final words and activated the seals on his body. He looked very fashionable, making the few hours he spent with Ino updating his wardrobe worthwhile. Yes, as he grew older, he started to pay more attention to his appearance than before, though he didn't think about it much. Naruto grinned and said, "Fuinjutsu rules," as he disliked spending a lot of time changing clothes. When in sage mode, Naruto began to move toward an area where he could sense people while extending his sensitivity. The results of his scan did not comfort him, as the area he was on was still quite large, resembling a peninsula, and he sensed that depravity had spread everywhere, on the ground, in the air, and even on a small nearby source of water. This infection also did not avoid living things, transforming them into something else. Instead, it turned out that the local creatures were wary, sensing the danger emanating from him, but they would not mind feeding on him because they felt hungry. When Uzumaki finally arrived at his goal and sensed people, he decided to pick up his pace. However, what he saw did not satisfy him. The blonde said, "Well, and an abomination," in reference to the scene before him. In front of him were creatures that had once been people, clad in rags and armed with whatever they had. Their skin turned gray, like a rocky surface, and there were numerous ulcers on different parts of their bodies, as well as bubbles that accumulated some sort of liquid in some places. These creatures acted strangely, pushing and screaming at one another, and their eyes displayed signs of insanity, and the noises they made were ones that Naruto would prefer not to hear. Throughout his life, Naruto saw a lot, but these creatures managed to arouse in him a deep sense of disgust that he did not even suspect. As soon as they saw him, they attacked him without hesitation and waved their hands. The animals lacked the instinct for self-preservation, and before they could get within 5 steps of the Uzumaki, their foreheads pierced the kunai deeply, instantly killing them. The son of Yondaime declared, "I'm not a doctor, but something tells me it's contagious," after observing the animals from a distance. Since Kurama is a semi-energy being, he sensed this infection more strongly than his Jinchuriki, and that made him naturally hostile. "Even I can feel this infection from your seal, it is deeply rooted in their very essence," he said. "Just in case, we need to get rid of the bodies, in case something comes out of them." "Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu," the blonde said after assembling multiple seals. He then used his most basic fire technique to burn the bodies, melting the kunai that were lodged inside. "Oh man, I liked those kunai," he said. "Do not whine, you have hundreds of them in the press of storage," said the fox. The blonde retorted cynically, "And let's tear off your tail, you have 9 of them, a bag of fleas." When Naruto named him so, Kyuubi yelled fiercely, "I have no fleas except you." He wasn't some mutt from the streets. The blonde gave the blonde the finger. "Fuck you, red rug." With his Jinchuriki, the bijou kept up, brainless bald monkey. Overgrown fox. Blonde idiot. Had it not been for something spherical rolling down and striking the Uzumaki's leg, the bijou and his Jinchuriki would have likely been fighting for a long time. "You he exclaimed in agony as his bare fingertip struck a circular object. "What is this?" "Looks like some kind of egg," the blonde said, holding up an unidentified creature's egg. "I can feel life in it, but it seems petrified," he said. The enormous fox growled at his partner's casual behavior, saying, "Idiot, don't take anything that fell into your hands. What if there is some kind of infection on it?" The fourth Shinobi World War hero exclaimed, "Oh," in a panic and flung the egg from his grasp while frantically inspecting his hands for indications of an infection. "Idiot," Kurama said, gesturing with his palm to his face, "Okay, you can pick it up, your body is fine." "Ehe," the sage of the Six Paths descendant said, embarrassedly scratching his head. When Naruto picked up the eggs of an unknown creature from the earth, it was fortunately unaffected by its petrification. The egg itself was dark blue with white spots scattered throughout, and its scaly shell gave the impression that a creature had curled up on a bun. Despite this, Naruto sensed that there was life inside the egg. Where did it come from? The blonde turned to face the direction from where the egg had rolled and saw molten iron and the remains of a tree that was slowly burning among the ashes. Most likely, those creatures were guarding some kind of box inside which this thing was, he said. The creature inside this egg has not much left, this infection in the air is slowly absorbing it, a few more years and it will most likely die or turn into something. I propose to crush him, it will be more merciful. Naruto firmly stated, "No, I can save him," despite the possibility that an unidentified creature would hatch from the egg. He did not want to abandon this infant. Attempting to reason with his fox Jinchuriki, he said, "We don't even know what Naruto can hatch from this, it could be dangerous." Yandame's son muttered, "Pf, as if I ever ran away from danger," as he started to pour his chakra into the egg to remove the taint that was torturing her. "Protection won't hurt," Naruto said as the Nine-Tails chakra mode's radiance encased his body in gold. There shouldn't be a contagion like this, so Naruto concentrated entirely on destroying all of that illness without leaving any trace. He would make sure to kill every last drop. Before long, a brilliant glow engulfed the area where the blonde stood, blinding and perhaps frightening away a few nearby living things. "Phew, it worked," the blonde said, wiping a drop of perspiration from his forehead. "However, the egg, it is warm, I feel that it came out of the hibernation in which it was," he said, adding that it was not as simple as he had initially believed to get rid of this thing. A reasonable question was posed by the bijou, "So, what is next?" I don't know." Naruto laughed uneasily. The fox growled in annoyance, "Kami for what me all of this?" After some hesitation, Uzumaki asked, "Well, can I plant him?" Kurama posed a reasonable query, "And how many eggs did you plant in your life, smart guy?" "It shouldn't be too difficult. I also thought that being your Jinchuriki shouldn't be too difficult when I was sealed into you, but it wasn't," Bijou said with a grin. A sardonic, "I love you too," the blonde said, "Maybe you should keep him warm. Or maybe throw this egg somewhere far away and not suffer. And we should get out of here, although the sky is not visible here, but something tells me that it is getting dark. I think the egg should be put away for now," Naruto said, pulling a travel bag from one of his body seals and setting it down. The blonde then relaxed and said, "Let's go," after ensuring the egg was enough strengthened for additional high-speed travel. Golden flames engulfed the Uzumaki's body once again, and then he vanished, leaving behind him only a golden streak of speed. A small ship that was compelled to cruise near the Valyrian waters limits that day reported a weird golden glow that terrified the crew and vanished as fast as it emerged. A mythology about a man who would later be known as the Golden Flame was only getting started, and nobody realized it. After racing non-stop for an hour toward the north of the peninsula, Naruto arrived at a destroyed city with the sea, or perhaps the ocean, beyond. He never cared about such things, and Naruto wished the land was closer so he wouldn't have to cross the sea like a fool. However, that was a thought for later. Now that night was coming, it was time to equip the pass, and it turned out that the fog was more transparent and didn't cover the sky on this location's borders. Uzumaki started erecting a number of protective, illusion, and signal barriers after placing the bag containing the recently discovered egg. Most creatures, aside from the Gray people, avoided him, but you never know what might show up. Contrary to popular belief, Naruto was not a complete moron, rather, he was ignorant of most elements of life. Nevertheless, he was making progress, albeit slowly. Thankfully, he received assistance from those close to him. His mood was ruined by thoughts of home and the people who stayed there. How are they doing? Were they aware that it was absent? Are they trying to find him? Crap, the Uzumaki yelled, kicking the closest rock. Why and by whom was he sent here? For what purpose? What does he intend to do? Up until now, Naruto has been furious that Kurozetsu was responsible for the majority of his problems. He detested it when various puppeteers attempted to manipulate him. For what purpose has this sissy and bastard destroyed entire lands and many lives? In order to bring back to life the madwoman who planned to simultaneously absorb all of the world's chakras and transform everyone into white Zetsu. But that doesn't matter, Naruto will return, discover the culprit, and make him regret it. The son of the fourth had to wait, gather information about the world he was in, and come up with a new plan of action. After he finally calmed down, he unpacked the sleeping bag and other camping supplies. Since he had a penchant for fire, building a fire didn't take long either. Naruto filled the camping kettle with water from his personal supply and pulled out the instant ramen because he didn't have time for breakfast. While the kettle was boiling, Naruto made the decision to handle this enigmatic egg. He was curious to see what would emerge from it because he had never seen such an egg, not that he had seen many. When he picked up the item of attention, Naruto questioned, "Is it just me, or is it warmer than before?" Kurama snarled, still annoyed that his Jinchuriki had taken the egg with him. "This thing was absorbing some of your chakra when you moved. I minimized it as much as I could, but this bugger managed to appropriate a meager part of your chakra," he said. Uzumaki observed reflectively, "It wants to get out, but something is missing," looking at the egg in his hands. What was missing? The sound of boiling water diverted Naruto's attention, so he set it aside and started preparing his own food. I filled a pack of ramen with the appropriate amount of water and waited 3 minutes. He still detested waiting 3 minutes for ramen to cook, so this was probably one of the few things he hadn't changed since becoming a genin. When the lengthy 3 minutes were finally over, Naruto started consuming his favorite dish avariciously. As he finished his meal, the blonde commented, "Delicious as always." Kurama said, "And how are you still not tired of eating it? Say what you want, for me ramen is the food of the gods." As Kyubi recalled, "Ga, you are Uzumaki and your passion for ramen." He recalled seeing a person with blood-colored hair gobble up several bowls of salted ramen. Choosing to disregard the nine-tailed fox's complaints, Naruto started to inspect the enigmatic egg. After a while of attempting to decipher its secret, Naruto groaned. "I don't know why, but something tells me that you need to come here," Naruto said, setting the egg in the middle of the flames out of some sort of premonition. Laying down on his sleeping bag, the blonde gazed up at the night sky, making sure the egg wouldn't roll off anywhere. "Beautiful," the blonde said, referring to the star's splendor. Naruto broke camp at first dawn and returned the egg to his backpack. "Maybe we should explore this city while we're here." "Suddenly we find out something about the egg," said a shinobi with a reasonable idea. Kurama said, "To my surprise, this is a pretty good idea, since his Jinchuriki was not a hopeless idiot. But we shouldn't linger here too much, even though the concentration of that abomination is less here than where we appeared," he confessed. The blonde said, "Well, let's go," and moved in the direction of additional buildings. As a result, after hours of searching, Naruto found only a few old books of poor quality, written in some strange language, and a few pieces of old jewelry made of some unknown metal. Of course, Naruto also found various pieces of furniture, murals, and much more, including human remains, but he did not see the point in taking them. The city was abandoned, and destroyed. The majority of the buildings were only ruins, and those few that actually stood were kept in snot. With a sad sigh, the Uzumaki said, "There's nothing interesting here except this book, but I can't read it because there's another language here. On the contrary, I would be surprised if there was something of value here. Apparently it was just a port city, and it has been in this state for more than 100 years, so the most valuable thing was either surrounded a long time ago, or it simply decomposed under the influence of time," decided Biju. "Although we have this book, it only remains to find someone who can read it," the blonde said in a tone that betrayed his frustration. "Ugh, I was hoping that I would at least learn something about this place," he said. "Let's go already, the sooner we leave this cursed place the better." "All right, don't sour grumpy foxes." The Jinchuriki then proceeded on their journey. Dick cursed his captain again as he looked out at the smoky sea. He had reasons to be unhappy and did not enjoy this adventure at first, so Ramos decided that it would be wise to go to Valyria. The fool believed that he could do things that other sailors, who were more skilled and experienced than him, could not do. Not even Corliss Valerian, who had made his 9 journeys twice, dared to come here. What are the chances of pirates without the smartest captain and the fastest ship when entire fleets vanish into these waters? He was certain that it wasn't very large. But for some reason, Ramos was confident of their success, and it was all because of a kid. After they had robbed one of the small temples of those madmen who worshipped Lawler, which was close to a village whose name he had long since forgotten, Ramos grabbed the boy. At first, the boy and others were going to be sold as slaves, but this was before the boy foresaw the impending storm when the skies were still clear. Of course, no one paid attention to him at the time. How could a temple boy predict a storm when they, the experienced sailors, did not see it? The boy was correct. Ramos kept the youngster close to him from that day on, not letting him go even 5 steps away from him. Their ship nearly perished in that unfortunate storm, losing half of the crew. Even so, they escaped only because of the boy's predictions. The boy, named Makoro, was tall for his age, had white hair, dark skin with flame tattoos on his face, and was of Valyrian descent. He predicted the arrival of a storm, the war galleys that plied the seas, or other pirates who would not mind making money off the goods he had gathered. On multiple occasions, the boy even predicted the location of some hidden treasure, and according to his recollection, 5 years later, they discovered 3 such treasures. Dick was a skeptic, but not an idiot. Even he understood that the boy had a magical gift, and most likely strong, given his predictions were somewhat accurate, but he did not believe that with simple predictions they could survive in this god-damned place. Dick had heard many legends, terrible legends, some of which kept him awake at night. Perhaps the most frightening of them all was about Arya Targaryen. Once she saddled the dragon of her ancestor, Balerion, and flew in an unknown direction. Many moons searched for the girl, but she appeared only 2 years later, skinned and dirty, did not land in the courtyard of the Red Castle. Arya immediately lost consciousness and developed a fever. The princess was actually burning from the inside, the heat was getting stronger, and something was moving under her skin. None of Maester Benifer's and Septon Barth's remedies helped. Her skin grew darker and darker, and eventually burst from the heat. Steam was coming out of her nose and mouth. To alleviate the fever, Arya was lowered into an ice bath, but from stress her heart immediately stopped, and worms of various sizes began to crawl out of her body, which died outside the body. Septon Barth, hand of the late Jaehaerys Targaryen, suggested that after escaping from Dragonstone, Arya was unable to control the dragon and Balerion carried her to the ruins of Valyria, where he was born. There, something happened to them that led to the infection of the princess. In addition, something happened to the dragon himself. He returned with semi-healed scars, which no one remembered before, and with a bloody smoking wound 9 feet long on his left side, and every year the mighty conqueror dragon weakened until it finally weakened and died 10 years ago. Since the Targaryens and their dragons were not immune to the horrors of this land, they were even more so, and he did not want these legends to come true. However, Ramos is unlikely to give up on his mad notion. Rulaller, flame, gold, flame. Golden. Dick was diverted from his thoughts by a frenzied wail. The boy looked ahead, where the fog thickened as if something were about to jump out of the cabin. A moment later, a disgruntled Ramos emerged from the cabin, pulling the boy's hair roughly and giving him a tasty slap in the face, which caused him to fall to the side. Makoro screamed with distraught eyes, repeating the same words repeatedly, tearing his throat. Dick voiced the displeasure of everyone gathered on the deck when he inquired, "What demon is going on, Ramos? Why won't the boy shut up?" The boy appeared to get louder every second. "Shut up." Ramos kicked him in the stomach, causing him to cough as all the breath was forced out of his lungs. "Yes, hell knows," he began to yell at one moment like a madman. Makoro had ceased yelling, but despite his labored breathing, he continued to repeat the same phrases. "What the?" A bright glow appeared in Duck's eyes. However, he had no chance to say or do anything more since she was severely shaken off when something smashed into the ship. While everyone was staring at him in disbelief, he stood on the deck of the pirate ship and, in the tailed Naruto's chakra mode, he looked around at the crew. Yes, it was just the pirates, filthy, randomly dressed, and armed, with many evil intentions, and, most importantly, the smell of blood on the deck, which meant that many people had been killed here. The ship smelled of death. Since he had previously dealt with pirates, he took advantage of the confusion that followed the war to make a fortune. He even had a pirate crew made up entirely of shinobi, and he had to put in a lot of effort to keep the sea safe from pirates. Naruto only needed to look at the pirate to identify him. While sailing the sea in a random direction, Naruto actually happened to stumble upon this ship by accident. Sensing life nearby, he made the decision to get to know the locals in order to learn more about the world in which he appeared. However, as soon as he appeared near the ship, he sensed the crew's intentions, fear, greed, anger, and hatred, and he could smell the mixture of these emotions a mile away. As a result, he realized that these were hardly any sailors who chose to go fishing. "And what are you going to do next? These guys don't look like good Samaritans." Naruto's tone turned violent as he said, "Everyone here is a murderer, thief, and criminal, except for one boy, so I will do with them as they do with pirates, I will kill them." When one of their own died, the pirates armed themselves with boarding axes and sabers, but before they could attack, the Uzumaki punched the two in the head with his bare hands. He picked up the axe of the victim he had just killed and threw it to another pirate, who then stuck it in his chest. The blonde quickly ran to the closest pirate and tore out a portion of his throat, splattering the deck with scarlet blood. Then, without turning around, Naruto threw the crossbow bolt back at the arrow, piercing his eye. Naruto stopped and saw that a number of pirates had gathered around him, believing it would work. Unfortunately for them, it won't. Grabbing the saber with his other hand, Uzumaki slashed the pirate's neck and then threw the body to the side of the two pirates, knocking off those legs. Closing the gap between himself and the other members of that group, the blonde blocked the blow with an axe and then threw the body overboard, kicking him in the stomach with such force that it crushed his insides. Ignoring the two who had been knocked down by the body, Naruto introduced the hearts of both with the blade of his saber. There were over 20 of them, but Uzumaki did not alter his face as the pirates continued to arrive from the ship's lower compartments, filling the deck. The blonde made a small wave as he directed the wind chakra toward the saber in his hands, and before the newcomers could comprehend what was happening, they were slashed through the floors, further reddening the deck. "There are only two left," Naruto said, glancing at the two pirates at the helm before focusing on a dark-skinned youngster with snow-white hair who was perhaps 12 or 13. "I have to be careful, otherwise the boy might get hurt," Naruto said. One of the pirates, however, clearly did not want to die much, so instead of standing like a pillar, he grabbed the youngster by the hair and stabbed him in the throat. "Keep your distance or he will perish." The pirate pointed a dagger at him and said something in a language he didn't understand. Another pirate yelled, "What are you doing?" The ship's captain, based on his attire, appeared dissatisfied with his subordinate's behavior. Although he knew the pirate wanted him, Naruto responded, "I don't fucking understand," noting that he had witnessed a pirate kidnap someone before in an attempt to escape his fate. The pirate yelled, "Drop the saber," more loudly than before, haphazardly swinging his blade. Okay, I'm quitting," slowly. He started to slowly place the saber, which had cracked from the impact of his chakra on the deck, without taking his eyes off the boy who appeared composed and confidently staring at him. Then, he pointed his index finger in the pirate's direction, and a concentrated lightning beam emerged from that finger, creating a through hole in the pirate's head and instantly killing him. Naruto was already planning to move and murder the second pirate, but an unexpected event occurred. Makoro was born into a modest family in a small village. Although they were not wealthy, they lived in plenty and contentment without needing anything. His parents adored him, and he had younger siblings. However, at the age of 7, he started to occasionally have strange visions, the meaning of which he did not fully comprehend. It was not until a while later that a priest of R'hllor showed up at their door. Initially, his parents were alarmed by the appearance of a servant of the Red God. Both of his parents were from Nath, and before they moved to that small town, they had heard a lot about the Red God. However, the priest was able to persuade his parents, and he was brought to the temple of R'hllor. His training as a future priest of the Red God began there, where he was taught to control and develop his powers of foresight, where he learned about the greatness of R'hllor, where he received his tattoos, and where his journey started. It wasn't the biggest or the prettiest, and there weren't many more than a dozen priestesses and priests, which wasn't surprising given that it was in a backwater village. After all, aside from a god who possesses an element that can both create and destroy, why would Rulalar bestow onto Makoro the ability of foresight? The temple's occupants and he both recognized that Makoro possessed a powerful gift. Why would God grant him such a gift if he was his earthly messenger? The priests wanted to send him to Volantis, where the greatest temple of Rulalar had been built. His mentors said he would find answers there, but he didn't believe it because he was only a boy and adults didn't listen to children. He went to Volantis because of the priest's ambitions rather than because he wanted to worship the Lightbringer. He lost in a single day, but this did not break him. Makoro realized that this was a test of his god, and that if he passed it, God would reward him for his efforts and punish sinners. The priest's plans were not meant to be realized, as the village was overrun by pirates, many of whom were killed, and the few who remained were taken to be sold later. Makoro realized that he was valuable because of his abilities, and it was only because of this that he was not sold or killed. Otherwise, he would have been killed long ago, even though there were moments when he was on the verge of death. The trial was challenging. In some places, he wanted to give up everything and just die. Pirates were cruel people who did not understand what pity and mercy were. He was frequently beaten and starved if his predictions did not come true, or they did not get the desired outcome. For years, Makoro lived among the pirates in this manner, frightened for his life and that each moment would be his last. But above all, he was terrified of failing the test that his deity had given him. Only one location fit that description, Valyria, the former greatest empire in history and the home of dragon riders, was a living hell that even the most courageous daredevils were afraid to ascend. Fortunately, Makoro's suffering was brief because God sent him his next vision, which showed him the destroyed Badlands surrounded by 14 fires full of darkness and monsters. Despite this, Makoro felt that the final trial was coming. Convincing the pirate leader that they would discover untold riches in Valyria was not difficult. Makoro was convinced that the man was too greedy for his own good during the years that he was with him, especially since the man would not let him go even a few steps away from him. Ramos, the ship's captain, attempted to persuade his assistants, but he ignored them, which benefited him. And he had another vision as they got closer to Tyria. A figure surrounded by golden fire. Rulalar was there. He has been waiting for him, and he has arrived. However, Makoro watched with incense as his god killed pirates with ease, as if they were insignificant ants. It was the greatest honor for him to witness the power of a god. As soon as Rulalar appeared, he started to drip his tormentors with special cruelty, crushing, breaking, and cutting them. No one was given mercy. If someone else had been in his place, he probably would have puked or gone insane from what he saw. However, Makoro was too enthralled with the god's struggle and was captured. He was confident that Rulalar would save him and passed all of his tests. As a result, the god used a beam from his index finger to kill the pirate who had captured him. Makoro chose not to remain on the side and demonstrate his loyalty, so he attacked Ramos by drawing a dagger from a corpse. The man was so shocked that he did not have time to react when the dagger went into his neck. Without pausing, he pulled out another dagger, splattering a fountain of blood that stained his face, but he kept striking. His oppressor was still alive, and years of bullying did not go away. All these emotions accumulated waiting to be released, and only faith in his god kept him from acting. Therefore, the murder of the leader of those scum became the trigger that released all that accumulated negativity, and he avenged them. For their village, for the mother, for the father. A hand that fell on Makoro's shoulder prevented him from more abuse of the already dead man. He turned around and saw his god, who no longer shone with a golden flame. He looked at him with sorrow and pity in his sky-colored eyes. God extended his bandaged hand to him and glanced at the dagger. Makoro granted his master's wish by holding the bloodied dagger in his open palm. After receiving forgiveness, the god threw the dagger overboard before drawing him to himself in a firm embrace. His eyes filled with tears, and he sobbed, allowing himself to be engulfed by forgetfulness. The first words Makoro heard when he woke up were, "I see you are awake," in an unidentified tongue. He was covered with warm blankets and placed nearer the fire to protect himself from the night's chill. It was already night, and the entire area was devoid of vegetation. They took a seat beneath a small, withered tree that he leaned on while he slept, and there was an unidentified metal object in the middle of a small fire that made some whistling noises. On the other side of the fire was his savior, the Lord of Light. Lord had spiky blonde hair, though it was an odd shade that was somewhat reminiscent of gold, with bangs that fell slightly over his left eye. His eyes were blue enough to rival the color of the sky, and his face was round in shape, though it did have some sharp features. However, the most unusual aspect of the god's appearance were probably the 3 symmetrical birthmarks on either side of his cheek, which gave him a wild charm. Makoro was unable to comment on the god's clothing because it was so strange for him, but it is not his place to criticize God for his fashion choices, even though he could tell that it fit Lord. Makoro bowed deeply and said, "I'm sorry, my lord, but I don't understand you." He dared not look into the deity's face. Makoro heard only an incomprehensible muttering from the god in response, followed by his back and forth steps, which revealed his thoughts. Finally, the sound of footsteps stopped, and the god spoke, but Makoro dared not raise his head. Rulalare's voice became insistent, and he repeated the same thing for a few seconds until the boy realized what he was being asked for. The young priest slowly raised his head and saw Rulalar staring at him with annoyance in his eyes, fortunately not aimed at him. Then Rulalar extended his fist to him, causing him to instinctively close his eyes in anticipation of the blow, but the blow did not come. When Makoro opened his eyes, he realized that God had not intended to punish him. Though he instinctively knew it wasn't meant for him, Rulalar scowled at him. The god shook his fist and said something that was probably comforting, but when he realized he didn't understand, he pounded his fists. The lad questioned, bewildered, "Do you want me to bang your fists, my lord?" The deity nodded and grinned, and Makoro grinned back. The god's smile was infectious. Makoro collected his thoughts and then slowly slammed his fist into the god's fist, feeling extremely anxious because it's not often that you touch a god. Then, memories of a pirate ship came to the young priest's mind, and he wanted to take his hand off of it and drop to his knees once more, but he felt a connection that consumed his entire body and being. His eyes widened as a voice in his thoughts asked, "You understand me?" It was a god's voice, yet he could understand it. Makoro turned to face the god, who was still grinning at him. "You understand me?" Naruto perplexed himself. After all the pirates were killed, Naruto carried the boy to the captain's quarters and laid him on a mattress. After examining the boy and making sure everything was in order, the blonde healed him by removing minor cuts and bruises. Of course, they did not pose any threat to the boy's life, but he could not leave things as they were. Naruto then made a dozen clones and assigned them tasks. The first half was to search the ship for valuables and get rid of the corpses, and the other half was to change the ship's direction to land. Fortunately, the land was not far away. At first, he was headed for the land, but the ship's appearance changed plans. As a result, the clones completed all of the tasks in an hour. The corpses were thrown into the sea after being carefully examined for anything useful. All of the food and water supplies were then gathered, along with the money. After the ship landed and Naruto got off with the boy in tow, he ordered the damned ship to be burned and the clones were dispelled. Naruto glanced at the ship before continuing on his journey through uncharted territory. While carrying the boy, Naruto considered the issue of communication with the locals. The Fourth World War hero was certain that there was a different language even when he came across those gray-skinned people, and even though they had gone insane a long time ago, this did not change the fact that they still had some meager human habits. A few of them muttered something that turned out to be the local language and was not a speech impediment or anything else. His guesses were also supported by a book with a different script, though the blonde did not rule out the possibility that this was an ancient language. Naruto was finally convinced of his guesses only when he met the pirates. Thus, the question arose, how can one interact with individuals from around the world without being familiar with their language and without a reference book? The response surprised Naruto by arriving swiftly, Ninshu. According to Kurama, Hagoromo anticipated the issue of language barriers when he developed the Ninshu. It turns out that there were multiple languages in the sage's day, and learning a language could take years, considering that a person would need to practice continuously. For this reason, the Ninshu had a basic form in the form of telepathic communication. Fortunately, when Hagoromo gave both of them part of his chakra, he also shared his knowledge with him, including about Ninshu, but not with Sasuke. Most likely, the old man knew that the last of the Uchihas would throw something after sealing Kagaya. To be honest, the knowledge of the Sage of the Six Paths was unique, and for some knowledge, another world war would probably start, so Uzumaki approached them with great caution and did not tell anyone about it, applying the acquired knowledge in the basement of his house, which was protected by all kinds of seals that he found during his trip to Uzushio, where, unfortunately, he also found a bunch of knowledge that would be better left lost. The basement itself was fortified so that only his blood could be found in it, which should have been fresh and extracted only a few seconds ago from his left thumb. The seals also scanned his mind. And just the thought of coercion would send the entire basement to another dimension where it would be splintered to hell. There were also a bunch of layers of protection that only he could bypass once again, and the basement itself was strong enough to withstand the strongest tailed Kurama bomb. It could be said that Naruto overdid it too much, but he didn't care if it was better to overdo it than underdo it, so he wasn't particularly worried about someone sneaking in while he was away. Since the sage's knowledge allowed him to do so, Naruto was initially concerned that this would not work because the locals lacked even the smallest amount of chakra. Of course, he could give the boy chakra, including the chakra circulation system, but why would he give such a power to an unknown boy just so he could communicate with him? He wasn't that dumb either. Fortunately, chakra was not needed for the fundamental Ninshu, which bonded their souls. He sensed it when he used Ninsha, and the youngster probably saw how his expression changed as well. The child asked in a voice he did not understand, Lord. The blonde told the youngster, I can't understand you if you speak out loud, speak in your mind, okay, and he seemed to comprehend him based on the hesitant nod. Lord Rulaller, inquired the boy. The son of Yondaime scratched the back of his head in perplexity, saying, I see you're a fast learner, but who is Rulaller? Then, Naruto didn't even consider the tests he still had to take with this boy. Naruto gained a lot of fans and followers after the Fourth Shinobi World War. He was accustomed to being in the shadow of a social society, so to speak, and was given unusually close attention. Of course, he had already been the subject of controversy, but that was because he was a Jinchuriki. In fact, some people even stole his personal belongings to create an altar dedicated to him, and one day, someone even stole the only picture he had of his parents. Behind the picture was his father's signature, which stated that they were waiting for his birth. Naruto went insane at that point, and Kurama dared not speak to him. The village then lost a number of buildings, and many shinobi, including his friends, were hurt. It's likely that the village would have suffered greatly if Kiba hadn't discovered the thief. There were some people who were convinced that he was a god, so the creation of secret societies and cults was not long in coming. To his misfortune, he even had to deal with several of them, and the purpose and motives of each differed from the other, one more crazy than the other in ideas. There was even some kind of cult that believed that they could get a piece of his divine power if they could drink his blood, somehow getting his blood issued for monthly tests. They drank it. In the end, they just got sick and most of them died painfully, being unprepared for the concentration of chakra in his blood. It was painfully toxic. And the fact that they were ordinary civilians also did little to help. At the time, they thought that someone was trying to take out Konoha's sponsors in a particularly sophisticated way. Everything became clear when they managed to save those few remaining undercultists in time, and after their cure, they confessed everything, being delirious, believing that he had begun divine punishment on them for their greed. On that day, Naruto was once again convinced that human stupidity knows no bounds. As for Naruto himself, he didn't consider himself a god. Yes, he had a power that could be called divine, and they probably would not be mistaken in this, because he received this power from Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the son of Kagaya Otsutsuki, known as the rabbit goddess. So Naruto was more of a human with divine powers than a god, and at best, he would be more of a demigod, given that he was a descendant of the sage of the six paths, as well as the alleged reincarnation of his youngest son. As it turned out later, Naruto was the bearer of Ashura's will, as well as his chakra. Then, during the war, he did not pay much attention to the whole topic of reincarnation, because there were more important things during the war. After all, if Naruto and Sasuke were the reincarnation of Ashura and Indra, it would not have been possible to resurrect Hashirama and Madara, who were the same reincarnations of the two sons of the sage. It wasn't until after everything was over and Naruto decided to take his training more seriously that he remembered it. Then Uzumaki thought that the sage made a mistake when he said that he was the reincarnation of Ashura. As Kurama later explained to him, the sage was well aware of this, and told him the first time when he did not understand anything. Unlike his Biju, the old man literally had to, shall we say, stupid to his level in order to explain everything to him. That day, Naruto was ashamed as ever for his ignorance. It's hardly his fault, though. What to do if he did not have normal teachers who would deeply engage in his preparation? The son of the red-hot-blooded habanero also questioned the fact that many individuals comprehended such complex concepts as reincarnation. Orochimaru himself might not have understood or known much, even if he died and changed bodies numerous times. The most crucial point is that Naruto would turn down the chance to become a deity because, damn it, he was born a human and wanted to die as one. Most importantly, Kagaya's efforts made Naruto despise the gods. Even if there were more amiable gods, he would kick their ass. Those with divine abilities chose to do nothing while Kagaya did all those horrible things, and they were all the same shit. Since it was too easy for Naruto to kill those pirates because they were too slow and frail, he wasn't overly shocked when the boy called him a god. Based on what he saw, he came to the conclusion that people like him are either not here or perhaps they are, but they are hiding. Nevertheless, for the first time, Naruto was mistaken for another god. The boy, whose name was Makoro, told him a lot about his religion and the world around him, even though it was limited because of his companion's age and the fact that he had few opportunities to leave the ship's territory during the previous 5 years. This was sufficient for the Uzumaki to develop a firm opinion about this world and God. First, it's worth starting with the fact that he ended up on a continent called Essos, and was one of the 4 planets known in this hemisphere. He could describe the situation on the continent in 2 words, chaos and stagnation. In addition to ET, there were no states in the usual sense, only city-states that competed and fought with their neighbors. The place where he appeared was called Valyria, or rather her remains. As it turned out a few hundred years ago, Valyria was a major empire that ruled over most of the territories of Essos for 5,000 years, until Doom happened, a natural disaster that ended their empire. The Valyrians were known for their dragons and their riders, for their special steel which was light, never rusted or dulled. The Valyrians were also known for their blood and fire magic, as well as the slavery business that this people took over from their enemies, the Giscari. But now there are grains of the freehold's greatness. Dragons were now only among the Targaryens, who conquered another continent called Westeros, creating their own dynasty 100 years ago. The secret of forging Valyrian steel was lost forever, and there were hardly 1,000 blades of this metal in the world. The knowledge of the magic of the Valyrians was also lost, and their slaves rebelled and began to kill their masters. After the destruction of Valyria, as you know, the continent was drowning in blood for hundreds of years, because the deterrent in the face of the freehold disappeared, and those few surviving Valyrians, instead of taking the situation into their own hands, began to fight each other so that in the end they were finished off by others. Only the Targaryens escaped this fate thanks to the gift of Daenerys Targaryen did not see the death that would overtake the freehold after 100 years. Thanks to this, the Targaryens not only survived, but also saved the dragons in order to further conquer Westeros with their help. Of course, now there were descendants of the Valyrians who honored the memory of their ancestors and traditions, preserving what little was left after Doom, but they did not have dragons, which made the Targaryens something special now. But Naruto's thoughts were not occupied by the Targaryens, not by dragons, although now he had answers whose egg it might be, not even their magic, at least not as a source of interest, which was some analog of chakra. The Uzumaki's thoughts were occupied with the doom of Valyria. The next in line for the title of Hokage doubted that the doom was just an eruption of 14 volcanoes. No, a simple eruption couldn't have done what happened to that land. Beasts could not mutate into bloodthirsty monsters whose goal is to kill and desecrate all living things. Entire sailors and fleets did not disappear into the waters without a trace for no reason, just because of changes in the landscape. An experienced sailor could bypass such obstacles, or turn back. A huge dragon that was able to swallow a whole horse with strong scales in just one bite did not receive a deep wound 9 feet long, and its rider, a girl of 14 years old, did not die infected with some kind of abomination due to a natural cataclysm. No, it was something else. Doom was brought about by something else, someone, or something else. Perhaps it was the Valyrians themselves, who, in 5,000 years, could grow arrogant and use their so-called magic to do something unfathomable that ultimately resulted in their demise. Was there anything beneath the freehold that the Valyrians unintentionally came onto, prompting more occurrences, and that shouldn't have been disturbed? In all honesty, the blonde had little knowledge and even less interest in learning the truth about Doom. Valyria was none of his business. Let the Valyrians themselves look into the nonsense their own ancestors might have brewed. Naruto would have to return there to learn the answers, but why? Why Valyria? Why and by whom is this being done? To avoid shocking the youngster, who would hardly be able to handle an encounter with a beast like Bijou, the blonde went to his colleague on a different channel and asked, "What do you think could cause this doom?" Although it is highly likely that they are responsible for their demise, Kurama, who has never been particularly compassionate, provided the expected response, "I don't know and I don't want to know, the fate of these bastards doesn't interest me much." He disliked the Valyrians because, with their dragon riders, they reminded him of the Uchiha, who had the ability to control the Biju with their Sharingan, which was enough to make him despise them all. Despite his lack of enthusiasm, Naruto groaned wearily as he poked about in the dwindling fire, asking, "You do realize we'll have to go back there if we don't find any answers, right?" The Nine-Tails detested slavery, and Kurama was aware of his shortcomings. He killed and destroyed many lives, but he did not subdue and use someone as a thing. Why would he do this with his strength? And for that reason alone, we have to find out why these bastards disappeared with their fucking empire, more than people. A nonentity is the only one who will utilize others to further their own objectives. The Jinchuriki voiced a reasonable inquiry, and if what caused the doom is involved in our movement. In a fit of passion, Kurama snarled, "I will destroy him. I will tear it into small pieces and burn it. And I'll scatter the ashes on the storm. No one dare to use us." He vowed to execute all the death sentences. "Calm down, Kurama, you smell like bloodlust from a kilometer away, which means from me too," Uzumaki said, trying to soothe his Biju. He was relieved that Mikoro was asleep. The enraged fox continued to yell, saying, "Calm down. Are you telling me to calm down?" "Yes, because we shouldn't jump to Kurama's conclusions, not the fact that the death of Valeria and our moving here is connected. We literally don't know shit, maybe we ended up there by accident." "HRR, since when did you get so smart?" The blonde smiled as he heard the fox growl in response to his statement, "Since you were sealed into me." Without responding, Kurama wouldn't be himself. "I see your teeth have erupted once you have become so impudent," he said. "Of course, one of us must have fangs, yours will already begin to fall out, Grandpa." To his Jinchurikis laughing, the Nine-Tails growled, "Brat," yet his tone was devoid of venom. Naruto returned to his own thoughts after they had both cooled down sufficiently. Interested in his friend's viewpoint, Naruto asked, "What do you think of this Lord of Light?" Kurama's response was clear, "The fact that he is an asshole, like other gods. I think so too, he does not seem to me some kind of protector of the weak. What god needs human sacrifice anyway? And what is not needed? This ruler is probably trying to pass for someone else," the blonde shrugged. "Based on our experience with Naruto, you should have understood that the gods are not kind, they are either queers or persistent queers, and so far we've only met the persistent ones." The blonde shook his head and said, "That's right, I've already made sure of that." Naruto occasionally pondered who he would have been and how his life would have changed in the absence of this divine crap. Would he win his village's adoration? Would you end up like Kakashi, a well-known killer, or a hero? In any case, would his parents have perished? Even while it is useless to dwell on the past, everything has already occurred, the ink has dried up, and as they say, we must focus on the future and urgent problems. How does he return home? Naruto slapped his face and screamed, "Stupid! How could he have forgotten about it?" Uzumaki began typing, "Gyaku," and bit his finger. Biju yelled, "Naruto stop," in an attempt to stop the Jinchuriki, but it was too late. Naruto's hand hit the earth, creating a bunch of Fuinjutsu, but it was too late. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. Then it darkened in front of Yondame's-san's eyes. His mind is spinning, his ears are ringing, and his heart is racing a little faster than normal as Naruto slowly opens his eyes and attempts to recall what occurred, but his body's weakness prevents him from concentrating on a single thought. The blonde gradually starts to notice his surroundings. He hears some noises and sees the blue sky above him. Uzumaki smells something tasty, but his body is still weak, so standing up is a little slow. A recognizable bass voice says, "Lie down," and he does as the fox commands. If he had been in danger, the fox would have warned him. He finds that he was well prepared, with a blanket covering his body and a cushion beneath his head. As he experienced all the miracles of chakra depletion, Naruto swore, "Oh, what happened? And why do I feel so weak? What were you thinking, fool? This is what happens when you use reverse summon without thinking about chakra cost." The Biju growls with a voice that combines annoyance and rage, but only Uzumaki can plainly hear his companion Biju's nervousness. "Ah, so that's why I feel so bad. I haven't had chakra depletion in a long time," Naruto said about 6 years ago when he fought that moon asshole. Because of his foolishness, he was attacked with an attack that used up all of his opponent's chakra. Only his Uzumaki genes and the fact that he was a Jinchuriki saved him from certain death. Naruto was furious with himself for underestimating the enemy, and at that asshole in a fit of rage, so he painted his pretty face on him before killing him. He took the body to his basement and started studying, becoming particularly interested in the one who looked like Kagaya. "You are lucky that this boy woke up after you fell unconscious. I sent him a mental image to take chakra restoring pills from your travel bag." Naruto groaned, "Ha, so he also found out about the egg, not like the news for some reason." When the egg he detested was brought up again, Kyuubi snarled, "To hell with the egg. You're more important than some lizard's secret egg." In response to the fox's scream, the Uzumaki laughed and said, all right, do not boil, otherwise the wool will fall out ahead of time." Makoro's mental message, "Lord Azor Ahai, are you awake?" cut off the Biju and man from continuing their fight. Naruto was so preoccupied that he didn't even notice the boy approaching him. Naruto was carrying 2 bowls that he had once borrowed from the pirates. They smelled good, and his stomach growled to his shame. Unfortunately, the boy believed that he was the chosen one of this god named Azor Ahai, who saved the world in his time. Naruto didn't know how true this story was, and he didn't care. As long as he is not regarded as a god, this is good. It's not that he was pleased, but that he was seen as someone else. The good news is that Makoro no longer considered him a god, having somehow become convinced of this due to ongoing visions. The blonde answered angrily, "Yes, I woke up, and, my name is Naruto boy, and stop calling me master, I'm not your lord." Naruto groaned once more, this time in frustration rather than pain, as Makoro stated, "Thank Rulaller that you're all right, I was very scared when I saw you unconscious on the ground." "Are you all right, sir?" "Water." Makoro had carried out his. He handed him a flask of water and said, "I'm fine boy, I just did something rash and paid for it, but don't worry, I'll recover pretty quickly, although we'll have to stay here for another day until I'm fully recovered," after emptying the flask completely and letting out a sigh of relief as his throat stopped hurting. "My lord, what comes next?" "Next, we must find some city or settlement, even some village will do, we are running out of supplies, and what to hide. I want to lie on a normal bed," the Uzumaki murmured as he sat down. "First we need to determine our location and arrange our route. Take the map from my bag." The chart Naruto got from the deceased pirate captain was just in time. The local blonde, who couldn't understand the language, hoped his ward could, or else they would have to spend a lot of time going back and forth. Of course, Naruto could probably cover the whole continent in a day if he wanted to, but with his small companion, it was impossible. He doubted that the boy's body would withstand the load if he ran with him in his arms at the speed of a genin. Still, the local people are too fragile for him. Of course, you can create a bunch of clones to scout the area and find out about the nearest settlements in a short time, but the problem is not that he can find the right place, but to deliver the boy safe and sound. After all, they may run out of supplies and Makoro will die of hunger or thirst. Naruto can do without food, water and sleep for 10 whole days only on one chakra replenishment. If he does not strain the body, it will turn out twice as long. There can be no talk of any pills that saturate the body. His body quickly burned everything before it gave him any effect, and that was for any other similar pills, so Naruto had a small amount of them with him. And then for others, on the one hand, it was bad, because no medicine could help him, even the same painkiller would be useless for him. On the other hand, he no longer had to eat the pills that Sakura made, which tasted terrible. Even Sai, who, being a member of the root ANBU, received immunity to all kinds of toxins, got poisoned. Naruto was wondering if Sakura tried what she cooked for him. If so, was it difficult to add any sweetener? Yes, drugs do not have to taste good, but still, you could think about it when you are trying to help a person who has saved you more than once. I wonder if everything would be the same if Sakura made pills for Sasuke. Most likely no, but honestly, he doesn't care. He ended the stupid competition for Sakura's heart a long time ago. Again, it's a different world, different people, and other things, so Naruto didn't even consider giving the Makoro food tablet since he didn't want to use the boy as a test subject. "Here, my lord," said Makoro, who didn't wait long and grabbed what he needed. He was about to go so as not to obstruct the Lord of Light's blessed warrior when he was called. "Makoro, I need your assistance. Can you read? I apologize if I let you down, but just enough to grasp basic concepts." The boy went down on his knees. "You didn't do anything wrong," Naruto said, stopping the other boy momentarily. "I need your help to work with the map, as I am not very familiar with this language," Naruto said. "As Azor Ai." The boy was slapped across the forehead before he could finish his sentence. "I told you to stop calling me that." Naruto still had a lot of work to do with this boy, though, and he needed to learn how to call him by his first name first. "What sort of dumb name is that?" "Azor Ahai, who gives their child that name?" "That is, if he gave his son the name Boruto." After saying, "Okay, then we'll talk to you about contacting me," Naruto opened the map and started looking at it. "Do you have any ideas about where we are?" Makoro pointed to the sea and said, "Well, we made our way across the smoky sea, and thanks to my ability, we avoided dangers. Ramos said we would stop at Tyria and move south until we reached the capital," the boy said, pointing to the peninsula's coast. He then pointed to the proposed capital. "But now we are on the opposite shore, and most likely we are in the lands of long summer. I have never been here, but I heard that nothing grows in these places," he said, making a circular motion with his finger to indicate the ground they were on. "And the closest settlement is," he said, searching for the closest town or village. The boy then swallowed for a second. Naruto didn't notice his young friend's caution, so he inquired right away, "What's wrong with this city?" The youngster stammered, "See City of M monsters, sir," in response. "Monsters? Let's go into more detail here," Naruto said, raising an eyebrow as his inner Bijou became intrigued. "Well, I haven't been there, but I heard about this place several times from the conversations of pirates. The city does not have the best reputation, and only a few slave traders visit it. People there are often born twisted and monstrous. Some attribute this to the fact that the city is on the demon road," the young seer explained. The blonde said, "Meh," and I thought that I could at least stretch a little, but the wind blew away all of his interest. He thought something horrible would happen, but it turned out that this is just a city where people live with various mutations and defects. "Don't worry, I'll protect you if anything," he offered. The boy was somewhat reassured by Naruto's remarks. "Thank you, Lord. But perhaps we should go somewhere else. Perhaps Tholos. From there we can board a ship and go to Volantis, Naruto said. When Uzumaki saw where the settlement called Makoro was, he shook his head and said, "No, it's too far, we don't have enough supplies." The boy's shoulders sagged as he said, "I understand. Well, if you like, we can set up camp not far from there, and stock up on supplies in the city itself," Shinobi said, deciding to feel sorry for the tiny one, who could live without a bed for a little longer. The youngster said, "Thank you, my lord," in appreciation. "There is no need to thank me when your back hurts, you will curse me for agreeing with you." After 2 days, they departed.